I just want to make a very quick response to the video I was looking on Brett Keen's site about can atheists and Christians be friends, and it features these two, I guess they're Christians, Jeff and somebody else, I can't remember her name, basically making an appeal to a friend of theirs, a fellow Christian, who they seem to have considered as dangerously straying from the path of righteousness by talking to atheists and participating in dialogues on in Stickham, I guess, those kind of places, with atheists and listening to those ideas, and giving a series of warnings. And this chap, certainly, I think his name is Jeff, seems to have blocked a lot of people from his own YouTube channel. I guess because I guess they're making comments or they're representing opinions that are contradictory to his own. And it's an interesting problem, I think. And I've been thinking about it in terms of morality. About morality. I suppose I'm prompted here by a video I watched on part of the TED Talk series. I'll put the link in the info box, by a guy called Jonathan Haidt. It's a brilliant talk, actually. It's about the roots of the moral roots of political behaviour in that particular case, but I think there's a way of applying it to religious behaviour as well. And he's conducted this very extensive research, not just in the States but internationally, about how people's moral opinions on different topics, where they come from, what the underlying principles that ground out these moral principles. And he gives a list of 5, and there's one I think applies in this case. I'll just go through the 5 very quickly. One is what he calls harm care, which is just the desire not to see anybody get hurt and the desire to help people if they need it. That seems to be a moral principle that's universal, a human universal. All cultures have that. The second is reciprocity or fairness. And again, that features in all cultures, all legal systems, all ethical and moral systems have that idea of just fairness, really. And those are the 2 that are universal. And there's another 3 which are less universal for reasons I'll perhaps come on to. One is in-group loyalty. And a lot of the moral principles we have are about loving your neighbour, for example, identifying a group that you feel completely loyal to, and by inference the rejection of those who aren't in the group. But in-group loyalty is the key part of it. The 4th one is deference or respect for authority, and again that's not a universal. It's very, very widespread, and we all have it to a certain extent and consider it part of our moral fabric. Honour thy father and thy mother is how it bears out in Christianity, but it has all kinds of other applications as well. And the 5th one, which is the one I think is really interesting, is to do with purity. A lot of our morality comes from what I guess is ultimately a metaphor to do with purity, and it plays itself out in different ways. Moral purity is often thought of in terms of the body, and that's where I come from, really, to do with the body. So things like sexual chastity is talked about in terms of purity, and that features within pretty much, well, it's very, very widespread in moral systems, this idea of you keep your body pure until you're married, for example. But it also comes into play not just in sexual terms, but in things like what you allow into your body in terms of food. There's the idea that the body is a temple, and you would only put, I don't know, free-range eggs and homegrown organic produce into it. It has got a distinctly moral edge, particularly increasingly so these days. And things like smoking. Smoking is just a health concern, but it's very hard not to feel the kind of tug of a morality attached to it. People are frowned upon for smoking, and it's not just because of second-hand smoke, it's not just because of those things. There's a kind of moral dimension to it. And these things are often combined. Moral smoking, the immorality of smoking is often conjoined to the immorality of sexual promiscuity. There's a great line in a Family Guy episode where the mother is teaching the son, Chris, how to find women and how to go on a date and what to look for in a woman if you want to get laid, basically. And she says something like, look for a girl who smokes. If she smokes, she pokes. Because the idea is that that if a person is immoral in one area, then they're going to be immoral in another. Impure in terms of the temple of their body, by allowing smoke into it, implies that they'll be impure in terms of their sexual chastity and let Chris into it in this case. So there's a whole dimension to do with purity. And I think this last point, this purity, has something to do with can Christians and atheists get along in that video I referred to at the top end. Because I think in addition to this moral purity, I beg your pardon, this bodily purity that shows up in chastity and food taboos, I think there's also a kind of cognitive purity, a conceptual purity. We don't, I say we, I'll say we for now, we don't like ideas that contaminate the temple of our thoughts sometimes, or I think a lot of people don't. The possibility of an alien and perhaps toxic idea getting into your brain and soiling its kind of white, smooth perfection is a very real fear, I think, for some people. And I think we all feel that. I mean, I feel that to a certain extent. I sometimes don't like thinking about certain things. It makes me feel uncomfortable. And it is almost a kind of sullying, a contamination. So I think there's a kind of moral purity of thought being metaphorically alluded to. And that's very much the case, I think, in this video about these Christians who don't really want their friend to have her mind contaminated by all these toxic atheist thoughts lodging themselves in there, even if they're never acted upon, even if they're never invested in to the extent that they're believed or given value in any way. Just the very presence of that thought, just like the presence of a dead fly in your cereal, is enough to render that holy vessel of cognition impure in some way. I think it's something like that. I mean, one of the interesting dimensions that or findings of this Jonathan Haidt talk that I mentioned, is that those first two moral groundings, if you like, one to do with harm and care, one to do with reciprocity, those are universals. But the other three, in-group loyalty, deference to authority, and this last one, purity, don't show up to anything like the same extent in some sectors of the population as they do in others. Those three are very big amongst socially right-wing individuals. People who vote in this country Conservative or people who vote Republican are much more likely to have their moral toolbox well equipped with those last three elements: purity, in-group loyalty and deference to authority. While people like myself who are more liberal or libertarian tend to not to value those. I can recognise them happening, but I don't value those as components of my moral fibre. I see in-group loyalty as leading to xenophobia. I see deference to authority as leading to dysfunctional hierarchies. And I see an obsession with purity as leading to all kinds of negatives. But Jonathan Haidt makes the point that these things are potentially valuable, so we shouldn't dismiss them out of hand, even though we may not automatically agree with them. And those dirty atheist ideas, that's what we've got.